All right, diving deep with John Wyclif today, huh? Fascinating, fascinating. And we've got, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy excerpts here. It's like I don't know, the ultimate cheat sheet for a thinker like Wyclif.
It is. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, exactly. And today, really going to try to unpack his ideas, especially for, a fellow philosopher. I think, get ready for some serious philosophical heavy lifting because we're about to grapple with some seriously complex stuff. So.
Indeed, Wycliffe was a real trailblazer, tackling some of the most fundamental questions of his time, and questions that still resonate with philosophers today.
Absolutely. Okay, so to set the stage, who was this John Wyclif?
Well, he lived from around 1330 to 1384, born in Yorkshire, and spent most of his life in that intellectual hub of Oxford. And it was a time of great ferment, both intellectually and religiously.
Oh, absolutely. And Wyclif was right in the thick of it, wasn't he?
Absolutely. He became a controversial figure known for his critiques of the church, which ultimately, led to him being labeled a heretic.
That's right, a heretic.
Yeah.
But despite that, his ideas had a profound impact
Yeah.
and continue to intrigue philosophers today. So for a philosopher like you, what makes Wyclif so interesting?
Wycliffe is particularly fascinating, I think, for philosophers, because of his unique approach to metaphysics, logic, and language. He insisted on a very tight connection between language, thought, and reality.
Yeah. Okay, that connection between language and reality is something I'm really curious about. Can you unpack that a little further for me?
Sure. So think of it this way. For Wycliffe, words weren't just arbitrary symbols. They were, directly reflective of the real world. He believed there was a direct correspondence between the structure of language and the structure of reality itself.
Wow. So he's not just playing word games. He's arguing that language is like a key to unlocking the secrets of the universe.
Right.
What were the prevailing views on language at the time, and how did Wyclif's position, challenge those views?
That's a great question. So during Wycliffe's time, nominalism was gaining some traction, and nominalists believed that universals, concepts like humanity or redness were merely names. They were just mental constructs, without any real existence outside the mind.
Okay, so they would say humanity is just a label we use, but there's no actual humanity out there in the world.
Exactly, exactly. But Wycliffe vehemently disagreed. He was a realist. He believed that universals were real entities existing independently of our minds.
Wow. So he's taking a pretty bold stance here, going against the kind of philosophical grain. How did this realist perspective shape his kind of overarching philosophical system?
Well, it really formed, the bedrock of his thought, and this conviction about the reality of universals led him to develop some truly innovative ideas, particularly his concept of formal distinction.
Formal distinction. I've heard the term, but to be honest, it's always been a bit fuzzy for me.
Yeah.
Can you break it down in a way that even I can understand?
Sure. So imagine a diamond. It's a single entity, yet it has multiple facets, each reflecting light in a different way. Those facets are distinct, but they're all part of the same diamond.
Okay, I'm starting to see the picture here.
Right. Formal distinction is like that. It's a way of understanding how things can be both the same and different at the same time without contradiction. It's a distinction in thought, but not a separation in reality.
So it's a way of understanding complexity within unity.
Precisely. For Wycliffe, formal distinction was key to understanding the relationship between universals and individuals.
Yeah.
He argued that each individual embodies a universal, but in a particular way.
Hmm. Can you give me a concrete example of how this formal distinction plays out in his philosophy?
Certainly. So take the concept of humanity as a universal. Each individual human is distinct, but they all, share in that universal humanity. The formal distinction allows us to grasp how each person is both a unique individual and a participant in a larger shared essence.
That's incredibly insightful. It seems like Wycliffe is pushing us to think about the world in a much more nuanced way.
Exactly. He wasn't content with simplistic explanations. He wanted to delve into the intricate relationships between universals and particulars, between language and reality, between the divine and the earthly.
Now, this focus on intricate relationships, did it also affect how he viewed how we describe the world?
It absolutely did. And it led him to develop three distinct types of predication.
Predication, that's a pretty core concept in logic, right?
Yeah.
It's about how we attribute properties to things.
You've got it. Most philosophers at the time were content with the standard way of saying, Socrates is a man, but Wyclif argued that we need a more sophisticated system to capture the nuances of how properties are related to things.
So he's not satisfied with simple subject predicate statements. He's looking for a deeper level of analysis.
Exactly. So he developed three types of predication: formal, essential, and habitual. Each one reflects a different way in which a property can be attributed to a subject.
Okay, I'm really intrigued now. Can we take a deeper dive into these three types of predication? This seems like a really crucial part of his philosophical system.
Absolutely. Let's start with formal predication.
Sounds good. Lead the way.
Uh,
I'm ready to explore the intricacies of Wyclif's logic.
Okay, so formal predication. For Wyclif, this deals with how a term signifies its referent. It's about that direct relationship between a word and the thing it points to in the world.
So it's about the most basic level of meaning, the way a word picks out an object in reality.
Precisely, yeah. So for example, the term Socrates formally predicates the individual who embodies that universal.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. But what about those other types of predication, essential and habitual? How do they differ from formal predication?
Right. So essential predication, this one delves a little deeper into the nature of the subject itself. It's about attributing properties that are inherent to the essence of a thing.
So it's about those qualities that make something what it is. It's defining characteristics.
Exactly. So for instance, having a rational soul would be an essential predication of human being. It's a property that flows directly from the essence of what it means to be human.
I see. I see. And what about habitual predication? Where does that fit into the picture?
Right. So habitual predication, this one deals with properties that are not essential but are, typically or commonly associated with a subject. These properties might not be part of the thing's essence, but, they are often true of it.
Can you give me an example to help illustrate this?
Sure. So consider the statement Socrates is sitting. Now, sitting is not an essential property of Socrates, right? He
Yeah.
can just as easily be standing or lying down, but it's a property that might be true of him at a particular time.
Okay. Okay. I'm starting to see the distinctions here. So formal predication is about signification,
Yeah.
essential predication is about essence, and habitual predication is about kind of common attributes.
Precisely. And Wycliffe saw these three types of predication as crucial for a nuanced understanding of language and logic. He believed they allowed us to make finer distinctions and capture the complexity of the relationships between words and things.
And all of this intricate system of logic is ultimately rooted in his belief that language reflects reality.
Exactly. For Wycliffe, logic was not just an abstract game. It was a tool for understanding the real world, a world structured by universals that are mirrored in language.
This brings us to Wyclif's Metaphysics, where things get really, really interesting, especially for a philosopher like you. His concept of being is particularly intriguing, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. For Wycliffe, being was not a simple concept. He famously equated being with truth. It's a bold claim that had profound implications for his entire philosophical system.
Being is truth. I'll admit that's a bit mind-bending. Can you help me unpack that a little bit?
Sure. So think of it this way. For Wycliffe, everything that exists is a truth. And every truth is a complex entity, not a simple one. Even something seemingly straightforward, like a chair, possesses underlying essences, potentialities, and a relationship to the divine. Its being is inseparable from its truth, which is the totality of what it is.
But even seemingly mundane objects are brimming with complexity and meaning. This suggests a very, very rich and intricate view of reality, doesn't it?
Indeed, it's a view that emphasizes the interconnectedness of all things, from the most humble object to the divine realm.
And this interconnectedness, did it influence his view of God and creation?
Profoundly. So remember how we discussed Wycliffe's realism, his
Mhm.
his belief in the real existence of universals? Well, he extended that realism to God's ideas. He argued that God's ideas are the blueprints for all things, and they're just as real and necessary as God himself.
Wait, so he's saying God's ideas are independent entities existing outside of God. That seems like a pretty dangerous theological position.
It was a radical view, and
Right.
and it got him into a lot of trouble. It challenged the traditional understanding of God's omnipotence. If God's ideas are necessary, that implies that God couldn't have created the world any other way.
So even God is bound by the logic of his own being.
That's one way to interpret it. Wyclif saw God's creation as a necessary emanation of his perfect ideas,
Yeah.
a view that had, far-reaching implications for his theology.
Yeah, I can see how this view would have sparked some controversy. It challenges traditional notions of divine freedom and will.
It certainly did. And this leads us to another controversial aspect of Wyclif's theology, his understanding of the Eucharist.
The Eucharist, that's the ritual at the heart of Christian worship, right? Where bread and wine are consecrated and become the body and blood of Christ. How did Wyclif's philosophical ideas shape his interpretation of this central doctrine?
Well, his view of the Eucharist was rooted in his metaphysical principle that being cannot be annihilated. And because of this, he argued that the bread and wine don't, literally transform into the body and blood of Christ, but remain present alongside them.
So he's rejecting the doctrine of transubstantiation, the idea that the bread and wine become the actual substance of Christ's body and blood.
Precisely. So Wyclif's view, which is known as impanation, it maintains the presence of both the bread and wine and the body and blood of Christ. He believed this interpretation aligned with his philosophical commitment to the permanence of being.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that interpretation would have raised some eyebrows within the church. It seems like Wyclif was constantly pushing the boundaries, challenging traditional doctrines with his philosophical insights.
He was a true intellectual rebel, questioning authority and seeking a deeper understanding of the universe and our place within it. This relentless pursuit of truth. It led him to develop some truly radical and innovative ideas, not only in philosophy and theology, but also in the realm of political thought.
Political thought. Oh, I'm intrigued. What were some of his key ideas in this area?
So Wycliffe developed a concept known as dominion. It's a theory about the rightful ownership of property and authority, and he argued that true dominion is based on grace.
Dominion based on grace. What exactly does that mean?
It means that you only have a right to own property or exercise authority if you are in a state of grace, living a righteous life in accordance with God's will.
So wealth and power are not inherent rights, but are contingent on one's spiritual state.
Exactly. And he applied this principle not just to individuals, but also to institutions, including the church itself. He argued that the church's, vast wealth and political influence were illegitimate because it had strayed from its spiritual mission.
Wow. That's a pretty bold claim. It seems like Wyclif's concept of dominion has some pretty radical implications for the distribution of wealth and power in society.
Absolutely. He believed that true Christianity demands a more equitable society where material possessions and authority are held by, those who are truly worthy, those who live in accordance with God's grace.
I'm seeing a recurring theme here. Wyclif was a thinker who consistently challenged the status quo, whether in philosophy, theology, or politics.
Yeah.
His ideas were deeply interconnected, each one flowing from his core beliefs about the nature of reality, language, and the divine.
You've hit the nail on the head. Wyclif's system of thought was remarkably cohesive, each part, reinforcing and illuminating the others. He was a true system builder, weaving together intricate strands of logic, metaphysics, theology, and political theory into a tapestry of breathtaking scope and complexity.
And that complexity, I imagine, is what continues to fascinate philosophers today.
It certainly is. Wrestling with Wyclif's ideas is like embarking on an intellectual adventure full of twists and turns, surprises and challenges. He forces us to confront fundamental questions about the nature of knowledge, reality, and the divine.
And speaking of confronting challenges, Wyclif's ideas were met with considerable resistance, weren't they? He wasn't exactly popular with the church hierarchy, to say the least.
To put it mildly, yeah. His views on divine ideas, God's omnipotence, and especially the Eucharist, they were deemed heretical, and this led to his condemnation and the suppression of his writings.
So he was a heretic, a rebel, a revolutionary thinker who dared to challenge the most powerful institution of his time. What What was it about Wyclif's ideas that sparked such fierce opposition?
I think it was his unwavering commitment to truth, his
Yeah.
willingness to follow his philosophical reasoning wherever it led, even if it meant, challenging deeply entrenched doctrines and authority. He held a mirror up to the church, exposing what he saw as its corruption and worldliness, and that made him a dangerous figure in the eyes of those in power.
It seems like Wyclif embodies the true spirit of philosophy, the fearless pursuit of knowledge, even in the face of opposition and persecution.
He certainly does, and Wyclif's life and work serve as a powerful reminder that genuine philosophy is not for the faint of heart. It requires courage, conviction, and a willingness to question everything, even the most sacred beliefs of one's time.
And despite the opposition he faced, Wyclif's ideas had a lasting impact, didn't they? He's often considered a forerunner to the Reformation, a pivotal figure in the transition from the medieval to the modern world.
Absolutely. His emphasis on the authority of Scripture, his critiques of the church's power, and his call for a more direct relationship with God, they resonated with later reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin.
So Wyclif planted the seeds of rebellion that would ultimately lead to the Protestant Reformation, a seismic shift in the religious landscape of Europe.
Indeed, his ideas, once considered heretical, eventually became mainstream, shaping the course of history and influencing the development of Western thought.
It's a testament to the enduring power of ideas. Even those that are initially suppressed or condemned can eventually emerge to reshape the world.
Precisely. Wyclif's story reminds us that the quest for truth can be a long and arduous journey fraught with challenges and setbacks. But ultimately it's a journey worth taking, for it is through the pursuit of knowledge and understanding that we can hope to create a more just, equitable, and enlightened world.
Well said. So we've explored Wyclif's life, his philosophy, his theology, his impact, even his political thought. It's clear that he was a complex and challenging figure, a true intellectual giant whose legacy continues to resonate centuries later.
A true trailblazer, paving the way for new ways of thinking about the world and our place within it.
But before we wrap up completely, I want to touch on one more aspect of Wyclif's thought that's particularly relevant to philosophers, his theory of supposition.
Supposition. This is where Wycliffe really delves into the intricacies of language and meaning, exploring the ways in which words function in sentences to convey, different layers of reality.
It sounds like he's anticipating some of the key ideas in modern semantics.
He certainly is. For Wycliffe, supposition was about going beyond the surface level of reference, beyond simply identifying what a word refers to understand how it operates within the context of a sentence, to convey different types of meaning.
Can you elaborate on that? Give me an example of how supposition works in practice.
Sure. So consider the word man in these two sentences. Man is mortal and Socrates is a man. Now, in the first sentence, man refers to the universal concept of humanity, whereas in the second sentence, it refers to a specific individual, Socrates.
So the same word can have different suppositions depending on how it's used in a sentence.
Exactly. Wycliffe identified several types of supposition, each with its own, rules governing how a term signifies its referent in a given context. He believed that a deep understanding of supposition was crucial for clear thinking and accurate interpretation.
This attention to nuance, this meticulous analysis of language, it seems characteristic of Wycliffe's philosophical approach. He was always seeking precision, clarity, and a deeper understanding of the complex interplay between words and the world.
You've captured it perfectly. Wycliffe was a master of subtlety and detail, a philosopher who was constantly pushing the boundaries of language and logic in his quest to grasp the intricacies of reality.
Okay, so we've really dug deep into Wycliffe's philosophical system here. The formal distinction, the types of predication, his view of being and truth. It's dense stuff. But how did all this abstract thinking actually play out in the real world? What were the practical consequences of of his ideas?
Yeah, that's a crucial question. For Wyclif, philosophy wasn't just an intellectual exercise. It had direct implications for how we live, how we organize society, and how we understand our relationship with the divine.
Okay, so bridge that gap for me a little bit. How did Wyclif's philosophy translate into action?
Well, I think one of the most striking examples is his influence on the Lollard movement.
A Lawler.
Right. So the Lollards were a group of Wyclif's followers who took his ideas about, the church, the Bible, and social justice and really ran with them.
So they weren't content to just debate these ideas in the ivory tower of Oxford. They wanted to bring them to the streets.
Exactly. So the Lollards, they challenged the church's authority. They preached in the vernacular and even advocated for a simpler, more egalitarian way of life. They were, deeply critical of the church's wealth and worldliness, echoing Wyclif's concept of dominion based on grace.
It sounds like they were almost proto-Protestant centuries before the Reformation.
They definitely were ahead of their time, and their activism, it had a real impact. It shook the foundations of the church, planted seeds of dissent that would blossom in later centuries, and contributed to a growing sense of unease with the status quo.
It's incredible to think that Wyclif's, these complex philosophical ideas had this ripple effect extending far beyond the confines of academia.
It does. It speaks to the power of ideas to shape history, to challenge established structures, and to inspire social and religious transformation. Wyclif's legacy is a testament to that power.
And that legacy, it wasn't without controversy, was it? He was condemned as a heretic. His books were burned.
Mhm.
How did Wyclif's ideas manage to survive and continue to influence thinkers centuries after his death?
Yeah, it's remarkable, isn't it? So, despite the church's attempts to suppress his writings, they circulated underground, copied and passed hand to hand, finding their way into the hands of those who were hungry for a different vision of the church and society.
So even in the face of persecution, his ideas found a way to persist. It's almost like a philosophical underground railroad, smuggling dangerous ideas across borders and generations.
That's a great analogy, and it speaks to the resilience of ideas. Their ability to transcend time and place, to find fertile ground even in the most hostile environments.
It's a reminder that truly groundbreaking ideas, they can't be easily silenced. They have a way of resurfacing, of finding new champions, of sparking fresh debates and controversies.
Absolutely, and Wyclif's ideas, they continue to resonate with contemporary philosophers, particularly those interested in logic, semantics, metaphysics, and the philosophy of religion. His intricate systems of thought, his meticulous analysis of language, his bold attempts to reconcile faith and reason. These continue to offer rich avenues for exploration and debate.
So even though Wycliffe lived in a radically different time, his work still speaks to us today. What would you say are some of the most important lessons we can glean from his life and work? What can a modern philosopher take away from engaging with Wycliffe?
Yeah, there's so many, but I think one of the most crucial is his unwavering commitment to the pursuit of truth, even when it led him into dangerous territory. Wycliffe reminds us that genuine philosophy requires courage, intellectual honesty, and a willingness to challenge conventional wisdom.
He certainly embodied that fearless spirit. It seems like he was never afraid to question authority, to push the boundaries of thought, to explore uncharted intellectual territory.
Exactly, and he also demonstrates the importance of meticulous analysis,
Mhm.
of careful attention to detail, of building coherent and robust systems of thought. His work is a testament to the power of rigorous thinking, of the importance of grounding our ideas in logic and evidence, even when dealing with matters of faith.
Yeah. It's a powerful reminder that philosophy isn't just about abstract speculation. It's about engaging with the world, wrestling with difficult questions, and seeking deeper understanding.
Precisely, and that's ultimately what makes Wycliffe such an enduring figure. He wasn't content to simply accept the status quo. He wanted to understand, to question, to challenge, and to transform. And in doing so, he left behind a legacy of intellectual inquiry that continues to inspire and provoke us today.
Well said. Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of John Wycliffe. We've explored his life, his ideas, his impact, and his enduring legacy. I hope you, our listener, have found this journey as enlightening and thought provoking as we have. It's been a real pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
It has. It's been a privilege to delve into the rich tapestry of Wycliffe's thought. May his relentless pursuit of truth continue to inspire us all.